The Marvel Cinematic Universe has been going strong since 2008, but its story at this point covers thousands of years. Need to catch up on the latest developments? Let's just go through the whole thing.
Where to start?
If you really want to know where things started in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you have to go all the way back to before the Big Bang. No, really. Before the beginning of the universe, before even the creation of the 6 singularities that caused the universe to explode into existence, there were the Celestials. Beings of infinite cosmic power, the Celestials, led by Arishem the Judge, created the original planets, stars, and life forms of the infant universe following the Big Bang. Realizing they need help to expand the universe and create more life, the first Celestials seed planets with embryonic Celestials. These new gods would be born once sentient life on each planet rose to a critical juncture, allowing for the emergence of a new Celestial and resulting in the destruction of that world. To assist in this process, the Celestials genetically engineered deviant monsters to wipe out the apex predators of each world, encouraging sentient life to develop and multiply. Unfortunately, the Celestials miscalculated. The deviants did their job so well, they started hunting down and killing all life forms, preventing emergences. To keep them in check, the Celestials created the Eternals, synthetic life forms sent to different worlds across the cosmos to kill the deviants and protect the planet's life forms. Regarded as gods and superheroes by the populace, the Eternals are unknowingly preparing the planets for their destruction. Following each emergence, the Eternals' memories are wiped so they could be reused on different worlds. Meanwhile, other interesting things are happening throughout the universe. The 6 singularities that created the cosmos became the Infinity Stones, objects that controlled fundamental forces like time, space, and reality itself. They were then scattered across the universe, popping up here and there and awaiting the eventual arrival of a giant golden oven mitt that would be used by a purple sociopath to kill off half the universe. That, of course, was billions of years ago, but it's not the only thing to happen in those long eons. Millions of years before we get to the present-day MCU, Ego the Living Planet comes into existence, gains cosmic awareness, and seeds thousands of worlds with his essence in an attempt to create another celestial being like himself. But though he may in fact be a godlike figure, in the end he's still essentially just a selfish, deadbeat dad. No wonder Peter has issues.
Well, of course I have issues! That's my freaking father!
As far as heroes and villains of Earth are concerned, the MCU doesn't start with Tony Stark getting kidnapped in 2008, Carol Danvers being taken to Hala in the 90s, or even with Steve Rogers volunteering for the Super Soldier program in the 40s. The actual beginning happened in 5000 BC, when 10 immortal Eternals, Circe, Icarus, Ajax, Kingo, Sprite, Phastos, Makari, Thena, Druig, and Gilgamesh arrived on Earth to take out the deviants on our planet. For thousands of years, the Eternals protected emerging humankind, largely through epic super battles with giant monsters. By 1521, the Eternals finally managed to defeat all the deviants on Earth, or so they think. Lacking any real direction now that their main reason for coming to the planet is gone, they scatter and get jobs as teachers, Bollywood film stars, and South American cult leaders. Since the Celestials have instructed the Eternals not to interfere in humanity unless deviants were involved, other godlike beings get the chance to descend onto Earth and have their time to shine. These include the Asgardians, vastly powerful alien beings who visit our planet many times and give rise to Norse mythology. Still, the most exciting stuff those guys were up to happens off-world in the realm of Asgard. This mythological timescale begins millennia ago, as we find out in Thor: The Dark World, when Malekith the Accursed lays siege to Asgard and is fought off by Bor, the father of Odin. Bor vanquishes Malekith, which turns out to be a temporary solution. While we don't know exactly when it happens, the next chronological event that we see from our characters is Odin's conquest of the 9 realms alongside his first child, Hela, goddess of death. During this era, the magic warhammer Mjolnir is forged in the heart of a dying star and used by Hela. Thanks to her bloodthirsty ruthlessness and ambition, Odin turns against her, and in the battle that follows, Hela slaughters the Valkyrior. The sole surviving Valkyrie flees from Asgard, spending the next few thousand years drunk and depressed. Eventually, she winds up on Sakaar, a cosmic garbage dump that an immortal being called the Grand Master builds into an interstellar gladiatorial arena. Hela is then imprisoned in another dimension by Odin, who covers up all traces of her existence. Sometime after that, but still far enough back that people were writing about it in the 13th century, Odin and Frigga have a son, Thor. Shortly thereafter, Odin slays the frost giant Laufey and adopts his son Loki as his own. Not too long after this, during their youth, Loki turns into a snake because he knows Thor loves snakes and then tries to stab him. In one universe, he manages to succeed.
What was your Nexus event, Your Majesty?
I killed Thor.
Also, millions of years before the present day, a meteorite made of the super metal vibranium strikes Earth in Africa, drastically affecting the surrounding area. Much later, this area becomes the country of Wakanda, when a warrior shaman receives a vision from the goddess Bast and founds a dynasty of kings known as the Black Panthers. The Wakandans become secretive and isolationist, remaining unconquered throughout history and using the vibranium to create fantastic technology, away from the eyes of the outside world. Moving to just about 1,000 years before the present day, the warlord Shu Wenwu makes a fantastic discovery of his own, when he comes across 10 otherworldly rings that grant him immortality and the strength of a god. Using the rings to establish his 10 Rings criminal organization, Wenwu conquers kingdoms and topples governments, amassing an incredible power structure that influences the direction of the world. Believe it or not, there's not a whole lot that happens between the unification of Wakanda, the rise of Wenwu, and the 20th century. In 1693, the witch Agatha Harkness escapes being burned at the stake by her mother, and a bunch of other witches who aren't happy with her practice of dark magic. She drains their life energies and gets her hands on the Darkhold before disappearing to get into all sorts of trouble before she pops up again in the present day. Jumping ahead to 1942, a Nazi officer known as Johann Schmidt experiments on himself with an early version of Dr. Abraham Erskine's super soldier serum, gaining both a physically perfect body and a decidedly redder complexion. Now calling himself the Red Skull, he takes charge of a splinter group called Hydra. With the discovery of one of the Infinity Stones in the form of the Tesseract, he creates a technologically advanced army of his own. That same year, Steve Rogers volunteers for the Strategic Scientific Reserves attempt at creating a super soldier using a technique created by Dr. Abraham Erskine. The project works, giving Steve the body of a hunky Chris Evans. After the experiment, Erskine is assassinated, and his research is lost. Rather than risking their only super soldier by sending him to fight in the war, the SSR gives Steve the codename Captain America, and uses him primarily as a spokesman to sell war bonds and USO shows set to an extremely catchy song. Eventually, Steve goes AWOL to rescue his best friend Bucky Barnes and becomes an active soldier in the war, leading a strike team called the Howling Commandos, including Bucky. On one of their missions, Bucky falls from a train into a ravine, seemingly to his death. However, Bucky is actually taken into custody by the Soviet army, given cybernetic enhancements, and brainwashed into becoming a super assassin, codenamed Winter Soldier. After attempting to use the Tesseract, the Red Skull is sucked into a wormhole, becoming the second person in Captain America: The First Avenger to survive an apparent death. In reality, he winds up on the distant planet Vormir, serving as a sort of spectral guardian for the Soul Stone. As for Steve, he crashes a bomber jet into the Arctic to keep Hydra from destroying New York. He is also presumed dead, but he survives, frozen in suspended animation for the next 66 years. Jeez, doesn't anyone who dies in this movie actually die? While things are pretty quiet for the MCU between 1945 and 1995, there are a few notable exceptions. Peggy Carter continues to work for the SSR, first in New York in 1946, and then in Los Angeles alongside Howard Stark in 1947. Around this time, the Soviet Union produces the first graduates of its brutal Red Room facility, where orphaned girls are trained as spies and assassins, codenamed Black Widows. Sometime after this, presumably around 1948 or 49, Steve Rogers travels back in time from 2023 to reunite with Peggy. She continues to work in military intelligence for the next few decades with Stark, whose defense contracts turn Stark Industries into the world's leading arms manufacturer. By 1970, both of them are working out of SSR headquarters at Camp Lehigh, along with a few other notable figures. Arnhem Zola, who worked with the Red Skull back in the 40s, is stationed here, and although his body dies in the 70s, his brain is transferred into a computer databank that continues Hydra's infiltration of the government. Also, Hank Pym is working here, assisted by Bill Foster in his experiments with the size-changing Pym particles that will allow him and his wife Janet Van Dyne to become the original Ant-Man and Wasp. Between the 70s and the 90s, several small but key events happened throughout the MCU. In 1974, Howard Stark launches the Stark Expo, displaying the city of the future, powered by a clean energy arc reactor that's about the size of a house. For some reason, he also hides the structure of a new element in the arrangement of the buildings, which is the kind of science it pays to not think too hard about.
Congratulations, sir. You have created a new element.
In 1980, Ego comes to Earth, winning the heart of Meredith Quill. 9 months later, their son, Peter Quill, is born. In 1987, Janet Van Dyne is lost in the quantum realm, after she and Hank Pym attempt to stop a rogue Soviet missile targeting the United States. In 1988, Meredith Quill dies from brain cancer, intentionally caused by Ego, leaving her son a mixtape of classic rock favorites. Peter is then abducted by a band of outer space outlaws called the Ravagers. Their leader, Yondu, then raises Quill as a son, albeit very abusively. In 1989, Pym resigns from the SSR, now renamed the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division, after finding out that they intended to use Pym particles to create weapons. Also that year, Air Force Captain Carol Danvers, who uses the call sign Avenger during her flights, volunteers for a test flight of a light-speed engine created by scientist Wendy Lawson. Lawson turns out to be one of the Kree, a militaristic alien race constantly at war with the shape-shifting Skrulls, and her engine is powered by the Tesseract. When they're shot down, Carol's body is overloaded with the Tesseract's energy, giving her incredible powers and also wiping her memory. A Kree soldier named Yanrog abducts her and takes her back to the Kree homeworld of Hala, where she is made to believe that she's actually a Kree named Veers, fighting alongside them as a member of the Kree Star Force. While all of this is happening on Earth, things continue to develop in space. Thanos, an incredibly powerful alien from the planet Titan who's obsessed with balance, begins to seek out the Infinity Stones. Along the way, he lays waste to half of the population of entire planets, occasionally taking young survivors and training them as soldiers. Assuming that most of the more humanoid characters are the same age as the people portraying them, then his two most notable adoptions happen in the late 80s or early 90s. Gamora is taken in as a young girl after Thanos kills half of the population of her home planet. Throughout her childhood, Thanos pits her against her adopted sister, Nebula. Every time they spar, Gamora wins, and Thanos systematically replaces pieces of Nebula's body with cybernetic parts in order to make her a more efficient killer. This creates a lot of resentment in Nebula, not only against Thanos but also toward Gamora, which will greatly affect their later relationship. In 1991, the Soviet government sends the Winter Soldier to assassinate Howard and Maria Stark. This will have massive ramifications later on, but the immediate effect is that their brilliant slacker son, Tony Stark, is left in charge of Stark Industries, along with Obadiah Stane as CEO. They continue to manufacture weapons using Tony's increasingly deadly designs, selling them to all sides of virtually every global conflict, with Obadiah in particular making a profit from secret arms deals with terrorist groups. In 1992, King T'Chaka of Wakanda goes to Oakland, California to investigate arms deals involving stolen vibranium. The culprit is his brother, Njobu, who is killed in the altercation. Njobu's son, Eric, is a witness to the whole thing and grows up craving revenge. Meanwhile, Russian super soldier Alexei Shostakov and Black Widow weapons designer Melina Vostokov go deep undercover in Ohio, posing as an all-American family with their so-called daughters, 7-year-old Natasha Romanoff and 3-year-old Yelena Belova. While Alexei and Melina work to steal a SHIELD, or actually Hydra, project focused on free will and mind control, Natasha and Yelena experience some semblance of a normal childhood. By 1995, however, the mission is complete, and the family flees to Cuba. However, once they arrive, they are split apart, and Natasha and Yelena return to the Red Room, where they continue their Black Widow training/torture sessions. Also in 1995, Carol Danvers, still without her memories of Earth, returns to her home planet after escaping from the Skrulls. She teams up with S.H.I.E.L.D. agents Nick Fury and Phil Coulson to stop the Skrulls from invading Earth, only to learn that they're not actually the bad guys. Instead, it's the Kree that are the problem, with Yanrog and Ronan the Accuser en route in search of the Infinity Stones that will end their war of conquest once and for all. Carol, taking the name Captain Marvel, fights them off and saves a bunch of Skrull refugees. In the process, an alien cat scratches Nick Fury's left eye, blinding it and causing him to sport a fashionable eye patch for the rest of the series. Before she journeys back into space to aid the Skrulls, Carol gives Fury a pager that can summon her in case of a dire emergency. Inspired by Carol and her original call sign, Fury lays the groundwork for the Avengers Initiative, a program designed to create a team of superpowered heroes to deal with large-scale threats like alien invasions. In 1996, Wenwu, having used his 10 Rings organization to secretly conquer or influence practically everything on Earth, turns his attention to the mystical realm of Talo. After finding a magical forest near the village entrance, he meets and falls in love with the village guardian, Ying Li. The two marry and have 2 children, Shang-Chi and Xiaoling. For a time, Wenwu reforms, but when his wife is killed by his rivals, he decides to recreate the 10 Rings and train his son, Shang-Chi, to be a living weapon. In 1999, Tony Stark meets bioengineers Maya Henson and Aldrich Killian at a conference in Bern, Switzerland. He's very rude to Aldrich, who remembers that as a sore point for about 14 years. Throughout all this, Hydra continues its secret infiltration of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all levels of the United States government. All that brings us to 2008 and Iron Man, the movie that launched the MCU. Almost everything from here on plays out in chronological order, in the years the movies were actually released. Almost. In 2008, Tony Stark is demonstrating his newest weapons in the Middle East when he's kidnapped by a terrorist organization called the 10 Rings, in what will eventually be revealed as a plot by Stane to get Tony out of the picture. While he's imprisoned, the terrorists force him and another captive, Dr. Ho Yinsen, who was also at that fateful 1999 convention in Bern, not that Tony noticed, to make weapons for them. Instead, Tony is able to recreate a miniaturized version of his father's arc reactor, using it to stabilize a piece of shrapnel that's lodged near his heart. The reactor also powers the Iron Man, a suit of weaponized armor built from scrap, which allows Tony to escape after Jensen's death.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps!
He returns to America, eats a cheeseburger, refines his design, and wipes out the 10 Rings, the ones in the Middle East at least, in a brutally effective display of the Iron Man's weapons. He also defeats Stane, who attempts to kill Tony and create his own massive suit of powered armor. Tony then publicly reveals his identity as Iron Man, causing Nick Fury to approach him about the Avengers Initiative. Around the same time as Tony's capture, Dr. Bruce Banner, whose 7 PhDs apparently include physics and biological engineering, is working on recreating the super soldier program. Instead of Erskine's Vita rays, he uses gamma radiation, testing it on himself and turning himself into a rampaging green, monstrous Hulk whenever he gets angry. After the Hulk inadvertently injures Banner's girlfriend, Betty Ross, he attempts to go underground, but returns to America in search of a cure for his condition. He winds up dealing with a scientist named Samuel Stearns, who wants to recreate the Hulk, and a soldier called Emil Blonsky, who turns himself into a similarly hulking monster called the Abomination. Also around this time, S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, is tasked with finding and eliminating Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. Barton tracks down Natasha to her safe house in Budapest, but feels Natasha wants out of the Red Room, so he lets her live. S.H.I.E.L.D. decides to let Natasha defect to their side, but requires her to kill her overseer, General Dreykov, first. Natasha and Clint rig a 5-story building with bombs and lure the Red Room's mastermind into the kill zone, but Dreykov's young daughter, Antonia, also gets caught in the explosion. While disturbed by the additional red in her ledger, Natasha nevertheless begins working for S.H.I.E.L.D. 6 months after revealing his identity publicly, Tony Stark is called to testify before Congress. Because they are justifiably concerned about a private citizen building a suit of armor that can vaporize a tank. To create their own version, they turn to rival weapons manufacturer Justin Hammer. After Tony's friend, Colonel James Rhodes, delivers a prototype Iron Man suit, Hammer and Russian scientist Ivan Vanko reverse engineer them into an army of drones. Stark also gets a new personal assistant, who is revealed to be S.H.I.E.L.D. agent and Red Room defector Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow.
I want one.
No.
Stark and Rhodes, equipped with his own militarized suit of armor codenamed War Machine, defeat Vanko and Hammer. Over at the Ten Rings compound, a now 14-year-old Shang-Chi has become the master of Kung Fu, having been taught every possible way to kill a man over the last 7 years. Assigned to assassinate the man responsible for his mother's murder, Shang-Chi completes his mission but is badly traumatized. Unwilling to return to his father, Shang-Chi cleverly adopts the name Sean and starts going to high school in San Francisco. There he meets his best friend Katie, a skilled driver. While all this is happening on Earth, there's other stuff going on in the golden realm of Asgard. Loki tricks Thor into antagonizing the frost giants of Jotunheim against Odin's orders. As a consequence, Odin exiles Thor to Earth and enchants his hammer, Mjolnir, so that only someone worthy of Thor's power can lift it. It lands in New Mexico, where Agent Coulson discovers it. After a bunch of hicks try to yank it out of the ground with pickup trucks, S.H.I.E.L.D. constructs a temporary facility around it. Thor eventually proves himself worthy, regains his hammer, and stops Loki from staging a coup in Asgard. In 2011, a team of Russian oil drillers discovers the crashed Hydra plane in the Arctic and alerts S.H.I.E.L.D. Captain America is thawed out and revived, and after realizing he's in the 21st century, he joins up with Nick Fury's Avengers initiative. It turns out he was just in time. In 2012, Loki, last seen adrift in space after his failed coup in Asgard, is enlisted by Thanos to recover the Tesseract from Earth, with his recent brief visit to the planet being seen by the Mad Titan as relevant employment experience. In exchange, Thanos gives him control of the Chitauri, a massive army of hive-minded destroyers which would allow Loki to lay waste to the planet. Loki, apparently being in one of his moods that day, agrees. He lets himself be captured by S.H.I.E.L.D., incites a riot, and stabs poor Phil Coulson in the back. But don't worry, he gets better. The ensuing ruckus provides the superheroes with a reason to come together. The result is the Battle of New York, in which the Avengers, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Black Widow, Hulk, and Hawkeye are gathered for the first time as a team. The good guys win after Loki is smashed against the ground 5 or 6 times, but the battle is not without its consequences. Unlike in the real world, where it's pretty nice these days, the MCU's version of Hell's Kitchen takes a lot of damage and winds up being a center of corruption and graft as it's rebuilt. This injustice leads blind lawyer Matt Murdock to take on the identity of Daredevil to fight against criminal kingpin Wilson Fisk, and eventually team up with other superpowered street-level crime fighters, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and kinda sorta The Punisher on Netflix. The reconstruction of New York is mostly handled by the newly formed Department of Damage Control, who take over the lucrative contract and leave construction foreman Adrian Toombs embittered and in possession of advanced alien technology. While the Battle of New York comes with its fair share of trauma, it also leaves some people inspired. After seeing Clint Barton unknowingly saving her life while battling aliens with a bow and arrow, 10-year-old Kate Bishop decides to take up archery and learn martial arts in an attempt to protect her family against future threats. She turns out to be a gifted, if extremely reckless, prodigy who often damages public property with her trick shots. In 2013, Tony Stark in particular is overwhelmed by the concept of his universe suddenly expanding to include gods, aliens, and other unknowable cosmic forces. He deals with post-traumatic stress, which unfortunately coincides with the return of Aldrich Killian. Killian has been experimenting with Maya Hansen's regenerative extremis treatment, which has the unfortunate tendency to cause its subjects to explode. To cover his operations, Killian appropriates Wenwu's 10 rings and creates a fictional terrorist based on Wenwu called the Mandarin, hiring an actor named Trevor Slattery to play him in threatening videos. The plot is uncovered and stopped by Tony and Rhodey.
I wouldn't go in there for 20 minutes.
In the aftermath, Killian is killed by Pepper Potts, and Slattery gets sent to federal prison, where he's later abducted by the real Ten Rings for impersonating Wenwu. Although Wenwu is intent on killing this strange man who named himself after a chicken dish, he has a change of heart after seeing how good Slattery is at performing Shakespeare, and decides to make him his jester. Around this time, Phil Coulson resurfaces and begins recruiting some additional members into his own Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They have their own adventures, including many involving the Inhumans and Ghost Rider, but like the good secret agents they are, a lot of this flies beneath the radar of most major MCU events. Oh, also Malekith comes back and Thor fights him, and Loki becomes the latest in a long line of presumed deaths that actually aren't. He stashes Odin in a retirement home in New York, and then takes his identity, ruling over Asgard and putting on critically acclaimed plays.
I'm sorry about that thing with the Tesseract. I just couldn't help myself. I know. I'm a trickster. Yes.
In 2014, Hydra's decades-long plot to infiltrate and take over America is finally discovered by Captain America and Black Widow, who also learn that the Winter Soldier is a brainwashed Bucky Barnes. While Cap fights to restore his best friend's memories, the Hydra plot is exposed, and in the aftermath, S.H.I.E.L.D. collapses, leaving the Avengers without the oversight and support of the larger organization. That power vacuum leads directly to Tony Stark and Bruce Banner attempting to create an artificial intelligence that would help protect the world. Unfortunately, they goofed that plan up big time, instead creating a genocidal robot named Ultron, who winds up destroying an entire city, resulting in the breakup of the country Sokovia. Hoping for an ally against Ultron, Tony and Bruce combined the Mind Stone, a synthesized body created by Ultron, and Tony's onboard AI, Jarvis, into a much more heroic AI called the Vision. Also, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, two definitely not mutants, join the team. Speedster Quicksilver immediately dies, partly from bullets, but mostly because Disney and Fox were having a problem figuring out the character's film rights. The destruction in Sokovia also kills the family of Helmut Zemo, who then dedicates his life to revenge. Immediately after the battle, the Hulk hijacks a Quinjet and blasts off to space, eventually landing on Sakaar. While all that's going on, Peter Quill is out in space on a job to steal a valuable orb, which, unbeknownst to him, contains an Infinity Stone. That puts him in the sights of both Ronan the Accuser, who's been looking for another Infinity Stone since 1995, and Thanos, who sends Gamora after him. Quill and Gamora wind up running across Drax, a very literal warrior whose family was killed by Thanos, Rocket, a space raccoon who was painfully experimented on and given cybernetic enhancements, and Groot, a tree. After being in prison together, the five of them stage a jailbreak, defeat Ronan in a dance-off, recover the Power Stone with the help of the real power, which is friendship, and turn it over to the Nova Corps, a bunch of space cops on the planet Xandar. Shortly thereafter, Thanos attacks Xandar and recovers it for himself. In 2015, an electrical engineer named Scott Lang gets out of prison and stumbles onto Hank Pym's old size-changing equipment. Under the guidance of Pym and his daughter Hope, Lang becomes the second Ant-Man and helps to keep the Pym particles from falling into the hands of an evil arms dealer. More importantly, it's likely somewhere around this time that a kid named Peter Parker is bitten by a radioactive spider, tries to capitalize on his powers by becoming famous as Spider-Man, and fails to stop a robber that later kills his Uncle Ben. None of this is actually covered in the MCU, but you might have seen 5 other movies about it. The following year sees Helmut Zemo's plan to destroy the Avengers reach its fruition, as the world responds to the destruction of Sokovia by trying to install new governmental oversight over the Avengers. Zemo furthers a wedge between Captain America and Iron Man by revealing that Bucky was the one who killed Tony Stark's parents. He also frames Bucky for the assassination of King T'Chaka of Wakanda, leaving the king's son, T'Challa, to take over leadership of the country, not to mention the identity and powers of the Black Panther. The end result of all of this is that the Avengers break up, the ones loyal to Cap go underground, and T'Challa refuses to give Zemo the death he desires. Fleeing the US after the rest of Cap's team is imprisoned, Natasha Romanoff spends some time in Norway watching James Bond films. Unfortunately, her vacation is cut short when she's attacked by Taskmaster, an assassin who can mimic any fighting style. Later, she discovers Taskmaster is the brainwashed daughter of a still-alive General Dreykov, who has restarted a crueler version of the Red Room that brainwashes new Black Widows and robs them of free will. One of those Black Widows turns out to be Natasha's sister, Yelena. Freed of her programming by another Widow, Yelena sends the brainwashing antidote to Natasha, drawing her into the fight. Together, Yelena and Natasha work to reunite with their former parents, Alexei and Melina, and really kill Dreykov this time. Although the dysfunctional Deep Cover family has more than its share of issues, they manage to pull together and take down the Red Room. In the end, Yelena gets to work liberating Black Widows around the world, while Natasha goes to break her other family, the Avengers, out of jail. While all of this is going on, Dr. Stephen Strange, who lost the fine motor control in his hands after a car accident, seeks out the Ancient One, and after her death, becomes a master of the mystic arts. He stops an invasion by Dormammu, a demonic force from the Dark Dimension, by using the Time Stone to die over and over again until the cosmic villain gets annoyed enough to leave the Earth alone. Meanwhile, the Guardians of the Galaxy encounter and subsequently kill Ego before he can manipulate Peter Quill into aiding his conquest of the entire galaxy. In the absence of the Avengers, Tony Stark begins to mentor Peter Parker. As Spider-Man, Peter tries to deal with the evil arms dealer known as the Vulture, aka Adrian Toomes, who turns out to be his homecoming date's dad. The Vulture is defeated, arrested, and sent to prison, but not before he and several of Peter's classmates figure out Spider-Man's real identity. Also, Tony Stark finally proposes to Pepper Potts. Lest you think Peter is the only superpowered teenager in the MCU, over in New Orleans, teenagers Tandy Bowen and Tyrone Johnson acquire powers of light and darkness and become the Vigilantes Cloak and Dagger. Meanwhile, on the West Coast, privileged teenager Alex Wilder and his friends learn their parents are all supervillains who control a powerful criminal organization called the Pride. The kids go on the run, learn many of them have superpowers or connections to advanced technology, and even run afoul of dangerous artifacts like the Darkhold. Sadly, it looks like Peter won't be meeting any of these young heroes, as their worlds are only slightly connected to the MCU. In Asgard, Thor returns from 2 years of looking for Infinity Stones in various realms to discover Loki's deception. When they find the real Odin, he's at the end of his life, and his death allows Hela to escape her millennia of imprisonment. She destroys Mjolnir, blasts the two brothers into space, and takes over Asgard. Thor winds up on Sakaar, where he recruits Hulk and Valkyrie for a mission to overthrow Hela, which goes about as well as it can for a plan that ends with the complete destruction of Asgard via Fire Giant. In Wakanda, T'Challa's rule is challenged by his cousin Eric, who teams up with evil arms dealer Ulysses Klaue and then betrays him in order to gain favor with Wakandans, who know Klaue as a vibranium smuggler. After being presumed dead, T'Challa returns, and aided by Nakia, Okoye, and Shuri, regains control of his country. After 6 years of waiting around, Thanos decides to personally seek out the Infinity Stones, and the results are devastating. He kills Loki and nearly obliterates the last surviving Asgardians, and an invasion of Earth leads to things getting so desperate that the whole Avengers crew, except Hawkeye and Ant-Man, who are under house arrest for violating the Sokovia Accords, need to get back together to sort it out. They don't do so well. Despite fighting on two fronts, with one small team in space and a massive force on Earth, Thanos gathers the stones, snaps his fingers, and kills half the life forms in the universe, dissolving them into dust. Before he dissolves, Nick Fury uses the space pager to alert Captain Marvel that Earth needs her help. A month later, Captain Marvel and the surviving Avengers track Thanos down in space, only to find out that he's destroyed the stones, and with them, any chance of bringing back the dead half of the universe. Thor beheads Thanos, and the Avengers return home. Weirdly enough, all of this happens while Ant-Man is involved in a relatively low-stakes heist movie. When the snap happens, though, he's left stranded in the quantum realm. While he's there, 5 years go by, during which the heroes deal with the horrific trauma in various, mostly unhealthy ways. Notably, Tony Stark and Pepper Potts have a daughter named Morgan. Banner merges his brain with the Hulk, while Thor and Valkyrie found New Asgard in Norway. Hawkeye loses his entire family in the snap, causing him to go rogue, adopting a new hairstyle and anti-hero identity as the merciless Ronin, who hunts down and ruthlessly kills criminals around the world. One of these criminals is William Lopez, the father of fighting prodigy Maya. After seeing her dad die, Maya swears vengeance on Ronan, not knowing that her dad's boss, Kingpin, wanted William dead. After Ant-Man returns from the quantum realm, where for him only a few hours have passed, the heroes realize that the solution to the problem is, of course, time travel. With the help of Iron Man and the now smart Hulk, the heroes travel back to various key points in the timeline, including 1970, 2012, and 2014, to gather up the Infinity Stones of those eras, along with Mjolnir, circa 2013. They also inadvertently bring the Thanos of 2014 forward to 2023, along with all of his minions. Fortunately, the Hulk uses a rebuilt Infinity Gauntlet to wish everyone back to life, and virtually every hero in the entire MCU takes Thanos on at once. The final blow is dealt by Iron Man, who dies on the battlefield. After gathering for a funeral, Steve Rogers hops into the time stream to return everything to where it should be, returning after living a full life with Peggy Carter in an alternate past to bequeath his shield to Sam Wilson, naming him the new Captain America. Outside of the mainstream MCU, the version of Loki that the Avengers freed from an alternate 2012 in Avengers Endgame ends up in the Gobi Desert, where he immediately begins fulfilling his glorious purpose by trying to conquer the world again. Instead, he gets picked up by the Time Variance Authority, or TVA, a time police force tasked with hunting down rogue variants like Loki and destroying alternate timelines before they can branch out too far from their sacred timeline. Loki gets paired with Mobius, a sympathetic TVA agent who recruits the trickster god into the agency to help find their latest target, another Loki variant.
This isn't about you.
This variant turns out to be a female version of Loki called Sylvie, who restarts the multiverse, allowing a bunch of rogue timelines to emerge from history. Loki teams up with Sylvie and discovers the TVA is made up of variants forcibly recruited into the organization to prune rogue timelines and prevent really evil versions of the TVA's mysterious leader from destroying everything. While offered a chance to let this deception persist, Sylvie instead murders the mastermind, letting the multiverse run wild. While this may lead to the destruction of reality, it makes one cosmic being's life more interesting. The godlike voyeur The Watcher observes realities in which Peggy Carter receives the super soldier serum. Doctor Strange destroys his universe, and Thor becomes a party animal. Ultimately, the Watcher is forced to evolve from observer to doer when a variant Ultron threatens to destroy all sentient life in the multiverse. Assembling his own Guardians of the Multiverse team, the Watcher manipulates events so the alternate realities can continue to coexist. In the mainstream MCU, the effects of Hulk's reverse snap are being felt on both a cosmic and street level. People like Yelena Belova and Monica Rambeau snap back to existence only to discover that 5 years have passed and their loved ones are now gone. Re-establishing their lives proves difficult, since different people live in their homes and billions are still legally dead. While support networks form, entire nations are also forcing out recent immigrants due to the sudden rise in population. Believing life was better during the blip when half of all life was gone, some people react to these changes violently. Anarchist Carly Morgenthau forms a terrorist group, the Flag Smashers, to attack governments threatening her one-world vision and even augments her team with a new version of the super soldier serum. This puts her in the sights of Sam Wilson, who rejects Steve Rogers' request that he become the new Captain America. After working with Bucky Barnes and seeing how Steve's legacy can be tarnished by unworthy successors like the dangerously unhinged John Walker, Sam takes on the mantle of Captain America and stops the Flag Smashers. The sudden rise in sentient life on Earth also jumpstarts the Emergence, which threatens to destroy the entire planet when a new Celestial is born. Alerted by the cosmic event and a few remaining deviants, the Eternals reunite. Where before they have always stood by and allowed planets to be destroyed, a few now have enough love for humanity to try and save the Earth. Cersei draws enough power from her teammates to halt the birth of the Celestial Tiamat, and the Celestial Ereshkigal uses the Eternals' memories to determine if Earth should be spared. While all this is going on, one rogue Avenger is unknowingly creating her own brand of chaos in the small town of Westview, New Jersey. Unable to cope with the loss of Vision, who Thanos kills by ripping the Mind Stone out of his head, Wanda Maximoff manifests powerful reality-warping abilities, Drawing from her childhood love of American sitcoms, Wanda warps Westview into an idyllic town where she lives a suburban life with a new version of Vision. She even gives birth to twin boys who quickly mature in a single episode. To maintain this illusion, Wanda inadvertently mind controls the real-life citizens of Westview into becoming her personal puppets. Her activities attract the attention of the new intelligence agency SWORD and Agatha Harkness. While Wanda eventually comes to her senses and tries to free Westview, Agatha goads Wanda into a battle. Wanda comes out on top, however, and although she has to sacrifice her happy life with her husband and children, she embraces her new role as the Scarlet Witch. She also takes Agatha's Darkhold and starts studying it, leading to some major problems very soon. Former assassin turned car valet Shang-Chi, currently going by Sean, learns his father is gunning for him when 10 Rings agents steal the jade pendant his mother left him. Teaming up with his sister, Shang-Chi finally addresses his issues with his father, stopping Wenwu from unleashing the soul-sucking monster known as Dweller in Darkness on the world. Before dying to save his son, Wenwu grants Shang-Chi the 10 Rings, which begin sending signals out into the universe. In Europe, Peter Parker attempts to have a vacation free of Spider-Man. Unfortunately, this becomes impossible when Nick Fury, actually the shape-shifting Skrull Talos, who is covering for Fury while he's on vacation in space, recruits Spider-Man to help Mysterio, a man claiming to be from an alternate universe, to save the world from dangerous elemental beings. Except it's all a lie. Mysterio is just Quentin Beck, a disgruntled ex-Stark employee who uses Peter to get his hands on a pair of Stark tech sunglasses that can control an army of weaponized drones. Spider-Man gets the drop on Mysterio's illusions to keep him from killing thousands of people. But in a final act of spite, Mysterio exposes Peter's secret identity to the world. With his secret identity now exposed, Peter turns to Doctor Strange, hoping the sorcerer can snap his fingers and wish his problems away. Instead, Strange offers to cast a spell to make the world forget Peter Parker is Spider-Man. It seems like an ideal solution, until Peter keeps asking Strange to rewrite the spell, creating multiple fractures in the multiverse and drawing in people who know Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Soon, Spider-Man villains from different cinematic universes, including Dr. Octopus, Sandman, the Lizard, and Electro, begin slipping into the MCU. However, the worst new arrival is the Green Goblin, who kills Peter's Aunt May. Distraught, Peter receives help from an unexpected source, two multiverse Peter Parkers who look a lot like Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. Together, the Spider-Men concoct some creative cures for their enemies and depower their shared rogues gallery. But just as things seem to be looking up, the multiverse begins to fracture. Peter does the responsible thing by asking Strange to make the whole world forget Peter Parker and prevent the villains from coming through. This essentially makes Peter a non-entity in the MCU, cuts him off from his support network of heroes and friends, and sets him up for a brand new trilogy of solo Spider-Man films. However, not all heroes need to be alone for the holidays. After a now 22-year-old Kate Bishop crashes an underground New York auction and steals Clint Barton's former Ronin outfit, she draws a lot of unwanted and potentially lethal attention to herself from the Tracksuit Mafia and Kingpin. Fortunately, Hawkeye is in town with his family to see the embarrassingly catchy Rogers the Musical. Initially hoping to retrieve his Ronin suit and keep Kate out of trouble, Clint ends up mentoring Kate as they go up against Maya Lopez, aka Echo, Yelena Belova, and Kingpin. After bonding with Clint over their shared trauma and showing she's really good at shooting people with trick arrows, Kate looks like she'll be taking over the mantle of Hawkeye and joining the MCU's ever-expanding roster of new superheroes. Every universe meets its end one day, but right now, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is expanding faster than ever. The addition of TV shows on Disney+, as well as Disney's acquisition of the Marvel properties that once belonged to Fox, means that more characters are entering the MCU than ever before. In addition, Marvel Studios' collaboration with Sony, which owns the film rights to Spider-Man and many Spider-Man-related characters, means the universe is more open to outside visitors than ever before. From the previous Sony Spider-Man to the Tom Hardy version of Venom. On Disney+, fans will soon be treated to the arrivals of Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, She-Hulk, Echo, and a secret invasion of Skrulls. On the big screen, a multiverse of madness is preparing to burst open. Also on the big screen, we'll see the further adventures of Dane Whitman, aka the Black Knight, the return of Blade, and an exciting sequel in the third Ant-Man and the Wasp adventure, which will feature Kang the Conqueror, a menacing variant of the character you may know as He Who Remains. A Black Panther sequel will broaden the world of Wakanda, and a fourth Thor movie will prove Jane Foster worthy of wielding the hammer. And in the more distant future, we'll certainly see the arrival of the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and who knows what else. The MCU timeline is an ever-shifting thing, but when it comes to the first 15 years or so, you can now consider yourself fully caught up.
Cool? Cool.
So cool.
Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about the Marvel Cinematic Universe are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.